Hi, middle grade readers. Nancy J. Cavanaugh here. I'm going to talk with you about the writing process today. I'm going to share with you some things that I learned about the writing process when I was learning how an engine works. Sounds like an unusual way to learn something about writing, but several years ago, I learned how to take apart an engine and put it back together again in order to understand how it works. And when I did that, I found a lot of similarities in the process of how an engine works and the writing process. And I'm going to share those with you today in hopes that maybe it will help you to understand the writing process a little bit better and maybe in turn make you a better writer yourself. So one of the very first parts that you will find when you're taking apart an engine is this small little part called the spark plug. The spark plug, even though it's small, plays a really important role. It collects a spark that ignites the engine and gets the engine going. So that's really important. Well, this made me think about the inspiration and the spark of ideas that start our stories. When I want to write about something, I wait to get a really good idea. I wait to get inspired. And an example of that is in my first book, This Journal Belongs to Ratchet. The inspiration or the idea came from the spark of an idea to have a character named Ratchet who knew how to fix cars, who knew how to work on engines better than most mechanics. And she did that with her dad in the garage. And that spark of an idea grew into a story that became my very first book. And that spark of an idea, though it was just about a girl who knew how to fix cars, turned into a story about a girl who was trying so hard to just be a little bit more normal and to fit in and to find a friend. And so it shows how that spark can really get things going, just like the spark can get an engine going. One of the next parts that you'll find in an engine is this part right here, which is called the piston. And the piston's a really important part because once that spark ignites the engine and gets the engine going, the piston moves up and down inside the engine and keeps the engine moving forward. So this made me think about characters in our stories. So in an engine, you can have one piston or you can have more than one piston. Just like in a story, you can have one character or most often you have many characters. Well, those characters, we need to get them up and moving around in order for there to be a story. So if you have an idea for a character, you have to get that character moving, just like a piston has to start moving inside of an engine. So in my book, Just Like Me, I had the idea for a main character named Julia and her two friends, Avery and Becca. And those three girls were all adopted from the same orphanage in China. And so they began life together and they had this special bond. So that was kind of my idea for the three characters that were going to be really important in this book. But in order for there to be a story, I knew that I had to get those characters up and moving around. So I sent those three characters to summer camp. And the story Just Like Me became the story of Julia going off to summer camp with her two friends, Avery and Becca, finding it very difficult to get along with them because they didn't feel like they had the special bond that their parents thought they should have from beginning their life in China together in the same orphanage. And then finding themselves, those three girls finding themselves in a cabin with three other girls who were impossible to get along with. So the story ended up being about those girls moving around at summer camp and trying to find a way to get along, find a way to figure out what they could do to solve the problems that they were having getting along in the cabin together. So those pistons, those characters moved around and the story began to grow. So the next part of an engine that I want to talk about is this big part called the engine block. And the engine block is actually what holds all the other parts together. There's a special spot in the engine block for each one of the parts, and the parts have to fit in there just right in order for the engine to work. Well, that engine block made me think of the setting for a story. The setting is the time and the place where a story happens. And the setting kind of holds the whole story together. So the setting's really important. And the story needs to fit very carefully inside that setting. Well, an example I have of that in my own writing is Elsie Mae Has Something to Say. Elsie Mae tells the story of wanting more than anything to become a hero. But her story is held within the setting of the Okefenokee Swamp during the 1930s. And that setting is really important to Elsie Mae's story because Elsie Mae wants to save the Okefenokee Swamp from a shipping company that wants to build a canal through the swamp that will just ruin the swamp. And that's where her grandparents live. So that setting of the Okefenokee and the 1930s is really important to Elsie's story, and it's what holds her story together, and it fits really well with the story that she wants to tell. Now, the next part that I want to talk about that has to do with an engine isn't really an engine part, but it's something that an engine needs in order to keep going. An engine needs fuel. Once it gets going, once the spark ignites the engine and those pistons start moving up and down, and it's all held together in that engine block, the fuel is what keeps it going and keeps it running. Well, the fuel in our stories is the character's problem. Did you know that every story has a problem and the character is trying to solve it? So in my story, Always Abigail has the problem of wanting to be on the pom-pom squad and to be popular. And that's her goal. That's what she's after. But when she gets to middle school, that goal is not so easy to achieve. So that is her problem. And it's what compels her and keeps her moving through the story. And that problem does not get solved on the first page or the second page or even the 50th page. She has to keep moving through the story trying to solve that problem. And she ends up with a dilemma on her hands that's very, very difficult. She has to choose between holding on to the little bit of popularity that she has for herself and doing the right thing and standing up for herself and for someone who everyone is bullying. So she finds herself in a situation where she knows the right thing to do, but she's not sure that she has the courage to do it. That ends up being her problem in the end, and that's the problem that she has to solve. And it's what fuels the entire story and keeps it going. So you can see how all those things have to work together and keep on working together in order for a story to eventually become a book. The last thing that I want to talk about is how when I'm writing, I take many, many things and put them together and give them my own twist. And when I give them my own twist, I'm writing a story that only I could write. And my newest book, When I Hit the Road, is a really good example of that. I take a lot of experiences that I've had and people that I've met and places that I've gone, and I kind of twist them around and make them into something brand new. What it makes me think of, many of you maybe have seen something like this. It's called a kaleidoscope. And when you twist it and turn it, when you look inside, you change what you see just by a little twist one way or a little twist another way. Well, that's what I like to think about doing when I'm writing a story. I take all those things, those inspirations, those ideas, the characters, the setting, and I give everything a twist. One way, then the other way. Maybe I twist a lot. Maybe I twist it just a little bit. But I end up with a story that only I could write. And you can do the same thing with your experiences and your inspirations and your ideas for writing. So I hope that you learned a little bit more about the writing process today. And I hope that the things that you learned are things that you can use in your own writing.